Your Property Podcast comes to you with thanks to our friends at Trafalgar Square Finance, leading independent specialists in mortgages and all types of property finance. Whether it's buy-to-let, development or bridging finance, Trafalgar Square can help you organise your funding for your next property project. Exclusively to listeners of Your Property Podcast, Trafalgar Square offer a free one-to-one consultation. So whether you are a portfolio landlord looking to raise funds on your existing portfolio, or if you're just starting out and want to find out if you are eligible for a buy-to-let mortgage, Trafalgar Square Finance can help. It's easy to book with one of their experienced consultants by simply visiting yourpropertynetwork.co.uk/finance. You can find this link in the show notes for more details. Hello and welcome to YPN, Your Property Podcast. My name is Michelle Cairns and today we've got with us Chris Moss. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Michelle. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. It's great to have you on. And I know we have kind of, crossed paths in various ways before on social media and through different networking meetings and groups. And it's been great to kind of see what you have been up to and how you have brought your background in marketing through to the property world and what you're doing now to help property entrepreneurs. So I think, today is going to be a really interesting podcast for people who are interested in how they can raise their profile. It's a topic that I think daunts some people. So it's great to have you on, and it'd be great to kind of dig into what people can do if they are a bit nervous about getting in the limelight, so to speak. So, but first of all, do you want to just give us a quick overview of yourself? And you've done some property portfolio building in your own way as well. So let's start there.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, bit of background on me. So I started my first marketing company about 11 years ago, something like that, when I was in my second year at university, and scaled that business to a team of 20. And we had an office on Oxford Street in London and worked with around about 300 large national brands to help them market themselves online. So sort of your O2s, Domino's, those types of companies. And then around about 4 years ago, I launched the Oversubscribed Marketing Company. And that was after a bit of insight into the property world, which I'll sort of hopefully share a bit more on. And the Oversubscribed Marketing Company helps property entrepreneurs raise their profile online. As you've said, it can be something that's daunting, and we do all the heavy lifting. And yeah, that's what the Oversubscribed Marketing Company now does. So yes, that's a bit of background on me. And then from a property perspective, as you mentioned, I built a small portfolio over an 18-month period, which sort of gave me that insight into the property world, which is really where the inspiration for Oversubscribe came from, because I had this background in marketing and knew what a lot of other industries were doing. And there was a lot of stuff that property and the property industry wasn't doing, but other sectors were. And it was sort of merging those insight into the property from growing my portfolio, but also having the background and other marketing company that I own.
Right. So, yeah. And so what did you notice about when you kind of stepped into this property world, property education world, which seems very kind of underground for people who aren't familiar with it, but coming into this community, I suppose, what did you notice? What gaps did you notice? What people were missing in terms of their own profile and marketing?
Yeah, so I guess it's a gift and a curse that property is potentially a very stable thing. So if you've got a portfolio, you potentially don't need to do that much marketing in theory and various other things, because it is quite stable. But what that I sort of realized is coming into this world is that there's a lot of tactics that people are using in other industries that aren't necessarily being translated into property. The sort of first one that hit me when I first started going to networking events was the quality of branding that companies would have, like a 99p logo with a picture of a house and like a Vistaprint card. Not that it was like
made on Canva as well.
Exactly, yeah, it was like the industry standard. And then I came across a handful of small other companies that we'd both be very aware of that actually were doing incredibly well. And one of the reasons for that is that they really understood what we talk about, which is like perception is reality. So they had branded themselves correctly. They had nice looking websites, they had professional logos and all these other elements. And that was when I sort of realized, okay, there's potentially a huge easy win here for the property community that does understand this and apply some of those tactics.
Yeah, I think some people I find are in the camp of, well, I don't need to do this. You know, they might be coming from a corporate world where they're not comfortable in social media, for example, or having a brand, and they don't really see that need to do that in the property world. And then there's other people who they really get stuck at this first stage of they need a business card and they need a website. And then they don't know where to go or how to find somebody reliable, or how much to spend and what is a reasonable amount. And rather than kind of getting out there and doing sort of income generating tasks as well, that they kind of procrastinate and stay stuck. So what would you advise people who are looking to start their brand, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally get that when you've got a million things going on, and I've been there a number of years ago where you've got sales to do, you've got marketing, you've got operations, you've got to find stuff. I appreciate there's a lot of stuff. And the key really from the branding side of things is don't do it yourself. Mainly because unless you are a designer, it's not gonna look good enough. Like obviously you can go on platforms like Canva and you can do it yourself or try, but the reality is it's not going to look world class. People will see that it's not quite there. So yeah, first thing is don't do it yourself, find a designer, and it doesn't have to be overly expensive, and there's different levels in which you can pay for all of this. But there's kind of 5 key assets that I think everyone should have. And the first one is what I would call, or what is called, a branding pack. And this is a really simple document that any designer can put together that has your logos that you use, fonts, colors, any clarification in terms of where to use your logo, what color backgrounds. And it's really the foundational document that once you've got that, you can give that to any designer and say, look, please, can you design me this advert or whatever it might be? And here's my branding guidelines. So that's the first one, is a branding pack, branding guidelines, so that it's really clear to anyone. That's the one that if everyone had, all of this would look good, because you can give it to someone and they could use Canva, they could use Adobe. It doesn't matter, because they know what you like and what is your brand. So that's the first thing. The second is having some form of branded brochure. Is the next thing. So like, rather than when someone inquires about your services, they might have seen you online, spoke to you at a networking event. Most people, what they'll do is have long wordy emails, or they'll have to talk to them on the phone and try and explain their services. Whereas if you've got a nice branded document that you can send to someone that clearly outlines, structured in the right way, then they've got that single document. Deal sourcing is a great example of this. And I'm sure you've probably seen it or come across them. I've definitely been, you get sent a deal from someone who wants to sell your property, and it's like, it's got spelling errors throughout, it's been done on like Word, and it just doesn't inspire you to potentially buy something worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. On the flip side, I know deal sources that are charging really premium prices because they've got a nice looking deck, and when they send it to clients, it's all branded nicely, and it just inspires you that, okay, these are a legitimate, trusted company.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And just a few points I want to highlight. First of all, getting that branding pack out and making the decision to get it done. You've got it. You've done it once, and then you can use it forever. And I think people do get stuck at the beginning, but actually if they just nailed that once and for all at the beginning, made a decision, outsourced it, paid for it, and had it sorted, then you're using it for your whole journey. Now you're probably going to be in property for for many people it might be their whole lives, right?
Yeah.
So to have that that, as you say there, the credibility, it builds that confidence, not just in yourself, that you're actually going to agents or you're going to landlords, you're going to vendors, whatever. You've got something professional and credible to present. But likewise, on the other side, when they see that, as you say, it inspires confidence from them as well. So great. I love these tips. The first two, fantastic. Keep going.
Yeah, so they're the first ones. And we can talk about how to get these done and sort of what sort of price ranges you should pay for them as well. So yes, they're the first two. The third one, which would literally put anyone listening in like the top 3% of their industry, is what we call a stationary stack. And basically what that is any touch point that you have with a client, branding in it correctly. So it could be your email signatures, for example, and I'm sure we've all seen them, where you get an email from someone, it's got a lovely signature. In fact, yours is a good example.
You, I was just thinking.
and it looks really, really smart, and it just puts across that right impression when you email someone, versus where you might just see it where it's just got someone's name and it just doesn't give you that credibility. So that's one of the things in the stationary stack. The other is a branded Word document. So whenever you are sending a document out, it might be a letterhead, it could be landlord letters, it could be whatever it might be, whatever touch point you've got with the market, is that branded document just gives you that credibility. And then there's lots of others depending on what you do. So like your social channels, your cover photos, all of those other touch points. And that varies depending on the company. But as you can imagine, if you've got your branding pack all sorted, you've got nice marketing material through your brochure, and then every touch point that anyone comes across with you, it just gives that professional feel. We did this for ourselves, and even though we do branding, it's what we do, we gave ourselves a sort of a level up in Q1 in one of my marketing companies, and we actually increased our revenue by 40% by doing nothing other than simply increasing the touch points and improving them with along our process. And we also included like strategic things in there, like more quotes, stats, statistics, testimonials. So it wasn't just the branding, it was the structure of it as well. But yeah, that 40% equated to hundreds of thousands of pounds in increase by purely just changing the strategy and structure of those documents. So yeah, even whether you're at the start of the journey or sort of further down, like the impact it can have is huge.
So with the packs and the websites, etc., I think one thing that people get stuck on as well is they have different identities, I want to say. So when they're with when they're with a landlord, that might be different. Let's say if they're looking for below market value deals or whatever. And then if they go to an agent, they might want to present themselves in a different way. Hopefully, most people have got one strategy. So let's say they're looking at service accommodation, for example. They might want a website that attracts guests and they can book direct. But then do they use the same website to attract landlords and investors as well? Another example, if you've got HMOs, do you have a tenant-facing profile or do you have an investor-facing profile? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think so we talk a lot about raising your profile and being sort of a market leader within your space. And the first thing to just clarify, and it's probably the biggest mistake I see within the property community, and again, this is where it's slightly different to other industries, is sometimes people can have multiple things going on. They can have like 4 or 5 things. They might be a deal sourcer, a trainer, and do all these different things, which is potentially very confusing to the marketplace because they don't really know what you do. And as a result, you don't really own any of those spaces. You're kind of like a bit of a jack of all trades, potentially. Not everyone, but some. So the best thing from a marketing strategy perspective is to choose one thing that you want to be known for and then go all in on that. It doesn't mean you can't do other things, but it just means that online you just talk about that single thing that you do, which then means that you get known for something as opposed to no one really knowing. So that's the first thing. And then in terms of your question on how do you choose which, like, do you have HMO agency, for example? Do you have on your site something for investors? Do you have something for tenants? Like, how do you do it? So there's no clear-cut answer for this that I have, unfortunately. However, the best case that I've seen where people have done this successful is having their personal brand that they use to communicate with investors and anyone where it's more of a personal approach. Even the below market value deal hunting side of things is all from a personal brand. And then they have a company brand, which is the agency or whatever it might be that is more customer focused from a tenant perspective. I know someone who's got very like tens of £1 million worth of properties, and that's the exact structure that he has, which I think works really, really well.
That's a great tip. Okay, right. And so I've interrupted your
That's
to
all
your checklist. Go on.
No, that's fine. So there's the five different assets that I think we should all have. So just to recap, branding pack is the first one. Brochure and marketing material is the second. Stationery stack is the third, which is the one that very, very few have, but really does sort of elevate you. Then the final two is a one-page website. So again, just a really straightforward website that is structured in a particular way to take whoever looks at it on a journey almost, as opposed to what most people do, which is sort of procrastinate on building a website. They try and overcomplicate it. It's got like 8 pages, and granted, it could be really good, but it takes so long to build. By the time it's built, it's sort of outdated. So I don't think for anyone early in their journey, that sort of makes loads of sense. A nice clean cut one-page website would do the job and be 10 times quicker to build. And then finally is their social channels. So just looking at their social channels, are they on point? And that's for personal branding perspective, if you're going down it from that route, or from a company brand. Yeah, because again, using the deal sourcer example, like the amount of times someone reaches out to me and says, hey, I've got this deal, and I'll click through on their social profiles to try and like get some form of credibility. Who are they? And like picture number 3 is them like down the pub with their mate. And I'm like, okay, again, it just doesn't give that impression. So that's the 5th thing, is just, are your social channels up to speed? If an investor was to look on your channels, would they take away what you want them to?
Yeah, I think it's something that people do overlook too often. Yeah. We had some guys on an apprenticeship and they worked with us, and I said, listen, the first thing I'm going to do is Google you. I'm going to look at your Facebook and I'll look at your Instagram. Yeah. Like, what can I see? And it was just exactly that. It's not something that's really talked about in schools either, or certainly, if you're working for a company and you're very corporate, you're probably, as I said before, more guarded about sharing, depends on your industry, anything personal as well. So it is, I suppose, getting that balance right between coming across as human. You don't really want a faceless company and that's it. You want to have some sort of personal presence, and that track record as well, so important. And I think that is something that having that brand awareness and having that social media presence really brings that credibility over time. So the sooner that you can start, the better, because then people can really see your journey, especially when people coming through the property journey and they're starting off and going to the networking meetings, and then they get their first deal, and then it goes on and on. So great. And the website you mentioned there, what sort of price point can people expect to pay at a starting point to get a basic website up and running?
Yeah, so it is a minefield, to be truth. There is a lot of there's a full spectrum. So you can go to places like fiverr.com, which is spelt with 2 R's, and on there you can find and access pretty much the world's freelancing design community, as well as loads of others that I'm sure many people might be aware of. And on there you could pay for a one-page website probably anything from £100 up to, like, I don't know what the upper limit is, but it's probably like 10,000 plus. I once spent £30,000 on a website, which wow. Was money wasted. So don't go to that extreme. Plenty of lessons learned. However, you do pay for what you get what you pay for. However, you could get something very reasonable for somewhere between 500 and £1,000 from someone who's got a good reputation, got a track record. Like that's the sort of range that you could do. But if you think about the return on investment of that over the lifetime that you have a website, especially in property, which is sometimes where it can be frustrating, is it only takes one deal to pay for all of these different assets that I've just mentioned. If everything that I just mentioned somewhere £2,000 to £3,000, that's one deal because, or one investor lends you money, or like the margins and the numbers are so big in property, it's so worth getting right. It's a different conversation if you're trying to sell t-shirts or something like that, because you've got to sell a lot of t-shirts to recoup your money. But with property, then you've only got to move the needle slightly with this stuff for it to really have a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, when you see people who are new to this and, they're kind of maybe making some mistakes, as we said before, by using like low quality products. Where do you think, and we mentioned before about having lots of hats on and having lots of different things that we can be spending our time and money on, where do you think people would get the best return from their money, I suppose, from all of the things that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I think the best place to start is the brand impact. So having a professional logo, colors, that's probably the one that most people skip that step. To be honest, very few companies do it. But then that means that they've not got that real solid document to hand over to people moving forward. So then they spend so much time, oh no, not quite that color, not quite this. Whereas if they just had that, it would cut it out. So that's probably the starting foundation for everyone, I would say. Yeah, because then you can build everything from that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And how about yourself then? So when you got started and you were working, building your portfolio and working with investors and agents, how did you find that? Did you think that, your branding helped you stand out to get extra deals or more conversations with agents or vendors?
Yes, yeah. So I'm going against here what I said you shouldn't do. So while I spend all my time and my focus is marketing, and that's all I've sort of done, and that's my day-to-day business. As you said, I do have a portfolio of properties that I've been purchasing, and the reason I did that is because I had sort of retained earnings, and the marketing company is successful to a degree, and I wanted to invest those retained earnings that we had. So I was in a slightly unique position going into it, in that I did have a pool of money. And an ongoing sort of stream of income. However, what I did know is that there would become a point where I might want to use investors. I also had very, very little time to be able to go and source properties. So it was very hands-off for how I did it. So I did use a deal sourcer. I probably spent about an hour a week and bought 9 properties over about 15 months, something like that, 10, 15 months. But it was very, very hands-off for how I did it. But because I had the funds, it allowed me to do that. However, to your point, I knew there was going to become a point where I wasn't able to I was going to need investor funds potentially. So what I started to do is document my journey on my website. So I've got a personal website, christopher-moss.com. And basically the first 9 properties I purchased, they're documented on there, like everything, like the strategy, the exact amount of money I spent, etc. Knowing, like you said, that there might become a time where having that backlog and credibility could really help me. So building that up, and then rather than me within my network being known as just Chris who really understands marketing, it was also Chris who understands marketing, but he has an interest in property too, which a lot of people in my community, property is not what they know. So it was quite a niche place for me to position myself too. And as a result, I was able to, in the end, use 50% of my own cash to buy the properties, and then 50% of an investor's money. So I raised around about £250,000-300,000 purely off the back of me, knowing some people and having documented that journey. Our clients are probably more unique examples of this. So across our clients that we help raise their profile online, between them over the last 12 months, we've raised about £2 million worth of investment purely through their social channels. one of those was £1 million. So one person got offered £1 million from one person who's following them online. So that sort of pulled up our averages quite a bit. But it's well worth anyone listening doing. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are really impressive numbers there of people raising money on social media, and we hear about it more and more now. I think for people who are not used to posting regularly, let's say, on Instagram or Facebook, then they get a bit overwhelmed by what content to put on and whether it should be more personal or more professional, and also about sort of the content being valuable and in giving back and making it interesting and informative as well, rather than just here's me at another networking meeting, right?
Yeah.
So what do you kind of advise people to do in that sense? So is that another, just outsource it? But even when you kind of outsource it, that person still needs to provide the content,
Sure.
right? So how do you manage that process?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about being a creator and not a consumer on social media. So a lot of people, as you'll appreciate, me included some days, sits there scrolling and just wasting time. And that's not where we want to be. It's just a total waste of time. It's not productive. We want to be a creator and use these platforms effectively. So that's sort of the mindset we come from with all of this. And then if people haven't done a sort of never used it before or just aren't that familiar with it, then choosing one platform, so it might be Facebook, it might be Instagram, whichever one makes the most sense, and then just having one message that they put out. So it's like one platform, one message, and then just starting once a week posting about their journey. And it depends where people are at. If they've got properties already, then they can showcase those. They can do a post type that we call Walk the Talk, and it's a Wednesday Walk the Talk. And that's about, on a Wednesday, posting a single picture of the house you've just purchased or the refurb you're doing or something, just to start building that credibility. Even if no one's watching, no one's liking, it doesn't matter, because that investor in 2 years' time, when they scroll all the way back by 2 years and go, okay, they've been doing this for quite some time, it builds that credibility. So yeah, that's the first thing. If people have got properties, if they haven't, then documenting the journey is the best way. So we have a post on a Friday that we call Food for Thought. And what Food for Thought is just sharing something in your journey and asking your audience for some input on that, and taking people behind the scenes. Everyone's nosy. Everyone wants to see what you're up to. So that's what that post type is all about, is taking that audience on a journey and just giving them insight. It might be that you go to a networking event. It might just be that you're looking around properties, whatever it might be. And even if people just choose one platform, post once or twice a week with that, and just start to get familiar with the platforms, is the best thing to do.
And do you think there's a better platform for people who are in property? LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook?
Yeah, so it does depend on who your potential target client is, and also a little bit depends on the content that you can create / want to create. If you're good on video and you like video and you want to go down that route, then Instagram's probably a really good platform for that, with their reels perform really well at the moment. Equally, there's a very large community on Facebook of property people, as you'll be aware. So yeah, it depends what you're looking for, but that could work really well. Equally, if you want to tap into professionals and you're looking for high net worth individuals as investors, then obviously LinkedIn is definitely the place to be, because you can search on LinkedIn by, like, if you want to go and find all the dentists earning more than £100,000 that may want to invest their spare money in property, you can search that on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Right. And the social media management, is that something that your company can help with, or is that something you have to outsource somewhere else?
Yeah, so that is something that we do. We are actually oversubscribed for the next 12 months. We've just finished an intake of new clients. So unfortunately, it's not something we can help with right now. But if someone's interested, then obviously they can reach out to me, and come next year, we could support on that. Equally, I'm always happy to drop a message and guide and stuff like that. So yeah, that is something. Because we don't have the capacity, other places people can look for support on that is, again, places like Fiverr.com. However, like you said, you kind of need a bit of an understanding yourself on it to delegate it. What I wouldn't recommend for anyone, including anyone who chooses to work with us, is never having to done it, never have done anything before on social and then try and outsource it, because it just won't work, because you won't understand what they want from you, and it's you'd be better to understand the basics yourself and then outsource it. So yeah, that's probably the best way to approach it.
Okay. And in terms of the content there, so we touched on a few things with the social media, but actually producing, you said there about not being a consumer and being a producer. So are there certain types of content that you think are worth more time to invest in creating?
Yeah, so the main thing is consistency. So while there are certain formats that would work really well, equally the effort for some people to do that right off the bat might be quite high. So it does depend on sort of where you're at. If you've never done it before, launching a YouTube channel probably isn't a good idea. If you've got no time and you don't really know how to do it, then it's probably not a good idea. Equally, any longer form content is generally pretty good at the moment, like podcasts, stuff like that, because even if no one listens to them at that point of recording, later on down the line, you could send it to someone. So I did a podcast recently where I talked exactly how the exact strategy I did for building the portfolio. And that's something now, if I wanted to guide anyone to, it's a long form piece of content I can easily guide people to. So yeah, I think longer form, if you've got the capacity and the time to do it's great. If not, just social media is probably the best place to get started.
Fantastic. So you said there that you're oversubscribed, which is great to hear, because I think, too often companies take on too much, work. They kind of just say yes, and then they haven't got capacity to actually deliver at the level they want. So so what are you up to now then, other than kind of delivering the clients that you've got? What's next?
Yeah, so there's two parts to our service. So the one is our content calendar service, is what we call it, and that's our social media management. That's the side that's oversubscribed. And then on a monthly basis, for a small handful of property companies, we create the branding assets that I went through. So that's where our sort of, I suppose, new business comes from on a monthly basis, is creating those. We only have a capacity to do a handful every month, because as you'll appreciate, they're quite time consuming. But yeah, that's where our focus goes outside of managing clients. That's the other side of the team's focus at the moment.
Right. And on a personal level, in terms of your property, do you think you'll be looking to build more of the portfolio, or you kind of, you've got enough going on at the moment?
Yeah, so the first properties the properties I bought over that sort of small period were all around Newcastle and in the northeast. But with the interest rates, that's sort of made those not make as much sense anymore. They're all on fixed interest rates, thankfully, so they're all good. But new deals didn't stack up in the same strategy I was doing there. However, we've got a current property in Ireland, in Dublin, that we've purchased, that's currently having a 40-metre extension, and it's quite a bigger than what we've done previously. It's also a lot more expensive in Dublin than around Newcastle. So that's where, from a property investing portfolio side of things, our focus is. However, as I say, that's all quite hands-off from my side of things. So I fund it, in short, but then have partners that actually make it happen, who are far, far more experienced in property than I am, because I am not very experienced in property. I understand marketing, but yeah, I'm a newbie in property.
Well, it just goes to show you, if you've got the right partners in place, that you don't need to be an expert in everything, that you just do what you do best, and then you work with other people, and you can still build a portfolio. There'll be many people listening now who do have some funds, tied up in a business or in their own properties or whatever, and they don't have the time or inclination to go out and learn everything themselves. So, it's inspiring to hear that you've managed to do it anyway, and you've just partnered up with people and made it happen along the way. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, my sort of decision to make was like, do I go on a mastermind? Do I try and learn property? Or do I just stick with what I know, do that as well as I possibly can, make sure it's lucrative, and then use those funds and partner with people? And I decided to go down that route so I can focus on what I do best and what I know, which is marketing, but then still have the advantages of building a portfolio for the long term. So yeah, fingers crossed that was the best way to go.
Well, it sounds very sensible. So great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really interesting and I'm sure very useful for lots of people who would like to get started. At least they've got some ideas of like what to do now and what to, what to start making. So brilliant.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much. And for anyone who is listening who's not yet a subscriber to the magazine, please click the link in the show notes for your free 30-day trial. Thanks everyone for listening again, and we'll see you next time.